All right, we'll move on to item 7F, presentation regarding update on the city street maintenance program funded through street sales tax, and that's Rocky Henkel.
Good evening, Vice Mayor. Good evening, Council. Rocky Henkel, Director of Streets and Stormwater. Tonight I want to give you a quick overview on how we plan to utilize the street sales tax fund for road projects adopted in the FYE 2019 budget. Although given the storm tonight, it's probably more appropriate to talk about stormwater projects. First, I want to identify the projects that we identified for contract work, projects we identified utilizing city resources, and the importance of identifying street segments versus overall. All right, the importance of identifying street segments versus subdivisions, and then the criteria we use to identify those street segments. The first project here for contract work is the Wolf Creek Subdivision. It's scheduled to bid August 20th. It is a concrete panel replacement project with a budgeted amount of $1.6 million. The next project is Central Park Estates. It's a carryover from 2018. This is actually a combination of work between city resources and contract work. Once our city resources finish up some of the work in the neighborhood, the remaining of that work will be contracted out with a budget amount of $350,000. The next project is what I'm calling concrete package number 1. It is a concrete panel replacement project that the budget amount is $484,000, and it consists of the Vandiver 6th, Aspen Pond, Forest Ridge, Millicent Pond, Southbrook, and Stacy Lynn subdivisions. Next, we have the Wedgewood 2nd Edition concrete panel replacement project with a budget amount of $394,000. Then we have 23rd Street, Kenosha to Albany, which is a preventative maintenance project. Budget amount is $195,000. And then the citywide striping, which was before you tonight to award the bid for lane markings and striping with the budget amount $290,000. And then finally we have these last two, the Arrow Springs Subdivision, which is asphalt rehabilitation with handicap ramps with a budget amount of $945,000, and Hidden Springs Addition with which is also an asphalt rehabilitation program project with a budget amount of $400,000. Moving on to projects where we utilize city resources, tentatively speaking, the Indian Springs Subdivision asphalt rehabilitation project was scheduled to start this week, waiting on the milling contractor to mobilize to begin milling operations with a budget amount of $300,000. The Angus Acres Subdivision, which is also an asphalt rehabilitation project, is scheduled tentatively to begin the week of August 27th with a budget amount of $155,000. Next is the New Tulsa Estates, same week of, to begin with. It's also an asphalt rehabilitation project with a budget amount of about $200,000. Kenwood Hills is also scheduled the week of August 27th, which is an asphalt rehabilitation project, budget amount of $145,000. And Foster Lewis is also scheduled to start that week, again an asphalt rehabilitation project with a budget amount of $125,000. The next project there is Carriage Crossing, which is a concrete panel replacement project with a budget amount of $50,000. Cedar Springs, concrete panel replacement, budget amount $50,000. 6100 Center, concrete panel replacement with a budget amount of $15,000. And the annual street maintenance just consists of various projects throughout the year with a budget amount of $100,000. And then crack sealing, again, it's various locations. It's a preventative maintenance project with a budget amount of $138,000, and the annual sidewalk maintenance, again, various projects with a budget amount of $75,000. So totaling up, the amount of contract work is about $4.7 million, which is approximately 78% of the budgeted amount, and city resources will be doing about $1.3 million, or 22% of the budget amount. Talk about the importance of street segments versus subdivisions. Here are two examples identified in the budget as just Angus Acres Subdivision and the Foster Lewis Subdivision. I've taken the liberty to drive these subdivisions and identify particular street segments. One, a street segment is more specific. Using the subdivision is pretty vague. It's important for two reasons. One, it'll allow us to be more precise with our estimates in the future when we bring recommendations to council for the future budget. And number two, it allows us to coordinate activities with other departments like engineering and utilities to see if there's any conflicts with future transportation projects or any water line replacement projects. So these are just two of the subdivisions I use, but I identified every subdivision there. I identified every street segment that we will be doing work in. And then finally, talk about the criteria we use to identify these street segments. We use a consultant that drives every one of these streets and puts together a pavement management index report, and it tells us the overall ranking of each street. And it's basically on 3 criteria. One is the roughness index, which is how many bumps there is in a mile, and then the pavement condition, which is basically any cracking, potholes, or raveling, or anything of the like. The pavement condition is the one that the public likes to use because it's more visible to the eye. The overall index, it takes into account a 3D image laser, so it identifies any subgrade failures or subgrade or subbase issues. So the overall index is calculated by 33% of the roughness index and 67% of the surface distress index. So in most cases, the overall index is going to be lower than what the pavement condition reflects. So we like to use the pavement condition because perception is reality. So with that, I'll entertain any questions or comments.
And what is our current PCI?
Around 70.
What do you estimate we save on city projects versus contractor? So a city crew doing a project versus what would it cost for a contract crew?
Oh, we're probably anywhere in the ballpark between 15 and 20%.
Rocky, talk a little bit about how the recommendations we're going to make to council on the use of the neighborhood maintenance funds in the bond package, where the street maintenance you just talked about is going to be for certain types of work, and we've talked about using the money that's in the bonds for more of those rebuilds, because several council members have talked about it's great to keep those streets that are on the higher end, but what are we going to do about those streets that are down at the bottom that definitely need to be rebuilt?
So the threshold is around anywhere, 50, 55, and an index below. For all intents and purposes, it's a lost cause for maintenance, so then it becomes a reconstruction project. So we identify these projects for maintenance anywhere from that 55 to 60 range and above to maintain.
You said the individual subdivisions, they would be identified, that it were identified here, that certain streets would be identified. Can we have a copy of those?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In the streets that are below the 50 mark, is there some game plan for long-term rehabilitation of those? So
Yeah, those are the streets that we'll coordinate with engineering to identify for reconstruction, and some of those are in the bond.
In my city manager's message for this year, I mentioned that we're trying to come up with a more systematic approach to how we're going to spend those funds, as well as how to spend those funds that we're going to get from the bond. Obviously, the first couple of years of the issuance, thinking positively, we're going to focus on the road widenings and the intersection improvements, and then we're going to be able to get into those neighborhoods. But in order to keep that pavement index condition where we're supposed to be nationally, where we're at right now, it takes a combination of both. And so what I want to be able to do is every year as a part of the budget process is to bring the streets that we're planning on doing for that fiscal year to the council. You'll see that because they're going to show up in the financial newsletter that we put out around Labor Day every year. And so I wanted the council tonight mainly to not only hear what we have planned, but also to make sure that you know that we are following up with your directive as to address those streets that need that extra attention.
And Mr. Spurgeon is exactly right. The combination, assuming the bond passes and the street sales tax, will accelerate the overall index of our roads.
Well, if I'm sorry. If I understand correctly, a PCI of 70 is very good,
It's good, yes.
but in order to be maintained, we have to be strategic about which roads we replace, which roads we fix, and how we schedule that
You are
out,
correct.
which is, I think,
And I want to make sure that those roads that are in the worst condition are certainly being addressed and have some timeline, because it's hard for us, and I voted for this process, but to go out and tell the citizens, well, we know your road's the worst, but we can come out ahead by fixing the better roads first to keep the index up. A lot of times the road's getting really a lot of disrepair, and it damages cars and stuff. So I just wanted to make sure that those are on the list and being repaired orderly, because sometimes the citizens just have problems with that.
I agree.
Let me add to that, council member, is that this year we're estimating, according to finance, about $3.6 million for the sales tax. And all that money goes for actual work on roads, sidewalks. None of it goes for paying for any personnel. It's all for actual construction. And we're going to be spending probably $2.7 million on actual work. And then we're going to be doing things like striping, which are important for traffic safety. So tonight, council awarded a contract for a larger contract than we probably will do every year, because there was a lot that Mr. Schwab said we needed to get done. But we're also going to be using those funds for concrete to help with doing concrete work and curbs and sidewalks in areas where we're doing the work, to try to do a more holistic job of actually improving the areas where we can, we're allowed to do so. Very similar to where we did the microsurfacing on Aspen from 91st to 101st. We went in and we installed sidewalks completely in that mile stretch. So now there's no sidewalks on both sides for a mile. And so we're really trying to take a more comprehensive approach about how to really go in and try to do things one time and then not have to go back unless it's actual maintenance.
Are there any further questions for Rocky? Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll move on to item 8 on the agenda, citizens' opportunity